Today we're going to make a perfectly puffed pita pocket. There are a couple of key things that separate regular flatbread from puffed pita perfection. And we can do these on a stovetop or in the oven. But either way, it's quite easy if we keep a couple of key things in mind. So before this turns into too much of a puff piece, let's go ahead and get started here. And this is one time I like to be precise with my measurements, especially because I was going to make multiple batches of this to test various things that make pita puff or not puff. So I'm going to go ahead and measure out 240 grams of white flour. That's approximately 2 cups. But as we can actually see here, what the package says should be 2 cups is more like 1 2/3 cup. And that was just a straight pour. I didn't do anything at all to compress that flour in the cup. And with pita, we really need the proper moisture proportion to get that perfect puff. In addition to our flour, we want 1 tablespoon each of sugar, yeast, and a neutral tasting oil of your choice, along with about a half teaspoon or so of salt. And finally, 2/3 of a cup of warm water. That should be about 100 degrees Fahrenheit or so. If it's too hot to stick your finger into, it's too hot. We can easily bring this dough together by hand or in a food processor, but I decided to use my stand mixer today. And we can easily scale this recipe up or down to make more or less pita bread. Just use about 1/3 cup of warm water per 1 cup. That's 120 grams of flour. Once the dough comes together into a ball for us, we want to continue kneading for another 3 or 4 minutes until it becomes nice and soft. The dough is going to be somewhat sticky, and that's okay. It needs that moisture for the puff. If the dough isn't sticking to your hands at all, it's too dry and you'll still wind up with tasty flatbread, but you probably won't get that puffed up pocket. Now that we have our dough, we want to give that a very light coating in oil, and we're going to set that in a warm place to rise for about 30 minutes while the yeast does its thing.
It's alive! It's alive!
Now that our dough is arisen, we're just going to go ahead and punch that right back down again. So the first trick here is having a nice sticky dough for our pita, and the second is the generous application of flour. And this isn't only so our sticky dough won't, stick, but this is also going to make the 2 flat sides of the pita more rigid, which might sound counterintuitive, but that is actually required to get that perfect puff. And I'm not just saying that. I tried an experiment where I used the exact same dough, except I rolled it out with oil instead. I actually really like the oil for rolling out. I think it's easier in several ways, but when I went to cook these up, I just didn't get any real puff. They did bubble up a little bit, and they were still super tasty flatbreads, but if you're looking for that pita pocket, I would definitely recommend sticking to rolling out with flour. But I don't want to incorporate too much flour right away, so I'm going to form this into a ball with my hands above the board before I cut this into a couple of even pieces. With the 2 cups of flour we've used, we can either make 4 large pita or 8 medium pita. Normally I do 8 unless I'm feeling extra lazy, but we do want to cover our unused pieces lightly as we roll out our dough. I like to form it a little with my hands first to try and get it into a rough disc shape. It doesn't have to be perfectly round, and honestly I kind of suck at getting these completely round, but it doesn't matter, they can puff either way. And keep in mind, this dough is super sticky, so don't be shy with the flour. You're going to want a lot of flour here. So let's go ahead and roll these out. And we want to get them pretty thin, like 1/4 of an inch at the thickest. And again, if these wind up not perfectly round, that's fine. Don't try and re-roll them. If we incorporate too much flour into the interior, these will not puff. Here's the general thickness I like to aim for. And as far as cooking these, my favorite is a cast iron pan. And that pan should be literally smoking hot. And to get both sides sealed to get that puff, we want to flip this sooner than you might think, which I'm going to execute oh so elegantly. Ah yes, Graham, perfect. But I really do find that early flip to be essential because you get those 2 sides sealed, leaving the gases inside nowhere to go, so it has no choice but to puff up into a little balloon. We can give it some encouragement with a light tap from a spatula, but don't press too hard. If we make a hole in it at this point, it won't be able to inflate. And from this angle, you can really get a sense for how hot that pan is. And once we've achieved puffed pita perfection, we do want to swaddle these in a clean kitchen towel. That's just to keep them soft while we cook the rest. And another great option for cooking these is on a preheated baking sheet in an oven as hot as you can get it. I have mine set to 550 here. Just make sure your pita are well floured so they won't stick. I had a hard time filming these in the oven because they puff up so quickly. I couldn't position fast enough for the first take, and then the second take, my camera mount literally broke on me. But anyway, you can see them getting a nice puff here in that super hot oven, where they need to cook for about 5 minutes. And if you happen to have a pizza stone, that works even better. I find the texture of the pita cooked in the oven to be a little firmer than those I cook on the stovetop, but I love them both. I hope you found this quick pocket guide useful. If you have, don't forget to give me a thumbs up below, subscribe, and hit that little bell so you don't miss our future videos. And before you go, check out one of our other great recipes on the screen now. This has been Graham with a passion for food.